続きまして、ネットゼロエコノミーにおける情報開示の重要な役割をテーマに、TCFD タスクフォース事務局ブルームバーグ公共政策担当副会長特別顧問メアリー・シャピロ様にご講演いただきます。本日はビデオメッセージでのご講演となります。
It's an honor to join you today for the Tokyo Sustainable Finance Forum. Many thanks to the Tokyo government and Governor Yuriko Koike for organizing today's events. With just weeks to go until COP26 and following the latest report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which signaled a code red for humanity, all eyes are on national action plans to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, also known as Nationally Determined Contributions, or NDCs, as the world continues on its path towards net zero. How quickly governments will be able to deliver on these commitments, if at all, depends on private sector support. Simply put, governments cannot achieve the transition to net zero alone. They need a combination of policy that supports the transition, corporate commitments to net zero with full transparency and accountability, and a financial community that is poised to seize the opportunities that will come in the transition to a low-carbon economy. Japan has set such a policy. In October 2020, the government pledged to cut greenhouse gas emissions in Japan to net zero by 2050. And Japan has the corporate commitments. Many domestic institutions have set net zero targets, including major corporations like Toyota, Sony, and Panasonic. A majority of these targets are for 2050, but a handful of companies in Japan aim to go net zero as early as 2030. Achieving these targets would result in significant decarbonization. And you have the support of the financial community. This conference is evidence of that, as today's agenda includes some of the largest financial institutions in Japan, including representatives from Japan's Government Pension Investment Fund, or GFIF, Sumitomo Mitsui, the Japan Exchange Group, and the Bank of Japan. While these groups, policymakers, corporates, and financial institutions all represent the different components needed for a whole economy transition to net zero, there is one other thing uniting all of their efforts: disclosure. Disclosure is foundational to the battle against the climate crisis. When markets have the data to accurately price the financial impacts of climate change, capital will shift towards businesses that put a premium on climate resilience, transition, and sustainability. But this virtuous cycle can't happen without first providing transparency into how companies are managing the effects of a warming planet. Bringing transparency to how companies are impacted by climate change is where the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, or TCFD, comes in. In 2016, the Financial Stability Board, which includes heads of central banks and G20 finance ministers, established the TCFD. The task force members are international, and all are from the private sector, including preparers and users of financial disclosure. The TCFD was tasked with developing a framework and recommendations to guide more effective and consistent disclosure of climate-related risks and opportunities faced by companies and financial institutions. In 2017, the TCFD published its recommendations, which are focused on 4 thematic key areas: governance, strategy, risk management, and metrics and targets. Each of the 4 overarching recommendations is supported by just 2 to 3 specific disclosures designed to provide decision-useful information about a company's climate-related risks and opportunities. Today, the TCFD recommendations have been embraced globally as the leading framework for climate disclosures. More than 2,500 organizations representing nearly $25 trillion in market capitalization from 88 countries and over 1,000 financial firms responsible for assets of more than $190 trillion, support the TCFD. 8 jurisdictions have announced or formalized mandatory TCFD-aligned national or sectoral disclosure requirements. And international standard setters, like the International Financial Reporting Standards Foundation, or IFRS, and the European Financial Reporting Advisory Group, or EFRAG, are using the TCFD as the foundation for climate-related reporting. Globally, the TCFD is becoming the common thread, tying together disparate reporting efforts to bring clarity and comparability to the data investors are increasingly demanding. Japan's role in the TCFD is really important, and Japan has long played a key role in driving global support and implementation of the TCFD recommendations. Thanks to the efforts of Japan's TCFD consortium, Japan leads the world with more than 400 organizations supporting the TCFD. The consortium and METI hosted the world's first TCFD summit in Tokyo in 2019 and continue to do so every year. We are enormously grateful for these efforts. The Japanese model has inspired the development of additional TCFD consortia. That's the case of a campaign launched by Sustainable Finance Ireland on the back of the Irish government's public statement of support for the TCFD. That campaign uses Japan's TCFD consortium as a template, driving support for reporting in line with the TCFD framework. In May 2021, the Japan Financial Services Agency, METI, and Ministry of the Environment worked together to release its basic guidelines on climate transition finance, following METI's policy of climate innovation strategy in 2020. The document suggests organizations disclose transition strategies in line with frameworks like the TCFD. And in June 2021, Japan's Corporate Governance Code was revised by the Japan Exchange Group to enhance the quality and quantity of climate-related disclosure based on the TCFD recommendations or equivalent international frameworks for listed companies. I'm pleased to share that yesterday we published our 4th TCFD status report, as we do annually at the request of the Financial Stability Board. This year was nothing short of exceptional for the TCFD, with disclosure in alignment with the TCFD recommendations growing 9 percentage points, more than doubling from the growth of 2018 to 19. And for the first time, over 50% of companies reviewed disclosed their climate-related risks and opportunities. More than 1,000 new organizations became TCFD supporters in the past year, a 98% increase from the prior year. The growth was bolstered by key policy announcements and moves toward mandatory TCFD-aligned reporting, support from international standard setters and regulators for the TCFD, and increasing investor demand for TCFD disclosure. This is an important signal that a paradigm shift from voluntary to mandatory corporate disclosure is underway. I believe we have reached a point of inevitability in the embrace of the recommendations as mandatory around the world. While the momentum behind this TCFD is very encouraging, the report showed that we still have a long way to go in driving full disclosure across each pillar of the TCFD framework. And there's not a moment to lose. Between national net zero commitments and the increasingly intense demands from investors for climate risk information, companies that are not yet implementing the recommendations are falling behind. The TCFD also released new guidance on metrics, targets, and transition plan disclosure to respond to the momentum behind net zero in both the public and private sectors. This guidance will help companies disclose more consistent metrics, more about their plans for the transition to a low-carbon economy, their progress over time, and for financial firms, how aligned their portfolios are with a well below 2-degree scenario. This will build on the already central role the TCFD plays in driving corporate actions toward a low and zero carbon economy by facilitating dialogues between institutional investors, financial institutions, and companies. The TCFD-aligned disclosures can help encourage and trigger the breakthrough innovations that will be vital for achieving net zero commitments. As leaders from across the Japanese public and private sectors, you have an important role to make net zero a reality. Thank you for all you are doing to help build a more sustainable and resilient global economy. Thank you.
メアリー・シャピロ様、ありがとうございました。